Robert Young Pelton, welcome to Radiant Creators. Thanks for being back on the show. The last time you were on, people loved it, got lots of traffic, and um, well, basically, this show is about, and Robert Young Pelton was nice enough to hop on and talk about this, since he's definitely, I think, the right person to run some things by. So, the world is now a dangerous place, and I'll start with every year an estimated 290,000 to 650,000 people die in the world due to complications from seasonal influenza, flu viruses. And that comes to around 795 to 1,781 deaths per day. And if we look at the COVID 19 deaths, if we go back to like March 10th, it was 271. March 30th, it was 3,709. Then April 11th, it was 6,092. So it does seem to have, as far as what we know at the moment, more of a higher death rate for those who get it than the flu. So, thanks for being back on the show. And you wrote, of course, The World's Most Dangerous Places, Travel Guide to the World's Most Dangerous Places. Well, now it seems like the whole world has become a dangerous place, especially for a lot of people, well, in many countries, but especially here in America where we're not used to it being a dangerous place. We're used to everything being pretty safe. And so, two lines that we mentioned in the last time you were on that I think are still really relevant are never confuse what you're afraid of with what can kill you. And also, we're losing the love of risk. We're letting fear prevent us from being great. And that's from a talk you did, Dangerous Places Revisited. So, with that said, America's become a dangerous place. And or at least it is perceived as one. So I would ask an authority on this, Robert Young Pelton, do you think America is a dangerous place, and how are people dealing with it?
Okay, well that's a good question because things have gone through one of those phases. Whether it's Pearl Harbor or 9/11, we've managed to seize the entire global collective consciousness and change perceptions. So humans are prey to fear. If you fire a gun behind somebody's head or they see a volcano blow up, they naturally become afraid. And they don't know why they're afraid. They just know that this is not normal and there's something they need to pay attention to. COVID-19 is one of a family of potentially lethal viruses with a 10 to 20% mortality rate amongst specific kinds of people, sort of older people, health challenged people. As a thing that can kill you, it's not that dangerous, but it's also an avoidable risk, and that's the key. So if there was a Ebola event going around, yes, you'd be good to be scared. This is the kind of thing that you can manage. So if you reduce contact and you stay up on the latest news about where it's growing, spreading, and things like that, you can navigate. Like I said, 90% of people are going to get through this. If you're traveling around the world, you're noticing that it's also moving. So I was traveling. I was in the Middle East, and now I'm back home. I could physically see that people that weren't in the middle of it sort of looked down on it as just sort of an overhyped threat. People that were in the throes of it, like Italy, were scared. And people that were sort of climbing up the curve, as they call it, were sort of getting a little nervous, but not quite knowing what to do. So they would go out and buy lots of toilet paper. They would get on the internet and Google. I think now we're at the top of the curve. It doesn't mean there might be another bounce with the second wave. But this is an exact example of something that generates fear, but can be managed by understanding how to avoid the risk.
Well, one thing I'm noticing is people aren't, many people are not really sure of what's going on. They don't necessarily believe the official narratives that they're seeing. And something I'm seeing that I really like is as we're all social distancing to get into the supermarket, and as we're all, checking out in these long lines, you'll see multi-generations talking to each other. And something that I'm noticing is millennials and boomer era people, love my boomers, millennials and baby boomer era people talking, and they both have their smartphones out and they're texting links back and forth. What's your number? What's your number? And they're actually, I've never seen so much online research and communication between generations. To people in our neighborhood, they're all, we don't talk to each other. It's rude, right? But but suddenly everybody's out drinking wine, walking around, and talking about life, things, building puzzles, kids, and coronavirus. So it seems like humanity. How has it changed all of a sudden? We're becoming a community again.
Well, okay, so this is a beautiful thing that everybody's your friend in a bomb shelter, right? Everybody
Yes.
suffering from the same threat is united against that threat. And this is the wonderful thing about human beings is that we normally live or should live in this sort of higher level of emotional intensity. But we don't. We're cocooned. We can get on our phones and TVs and whatever and see all the misery of the world in about 15 to 30 minutes and then go off and do whatever we do. And we're not really hyperstimulated. Humans need to be stimulated. They need risk. They need that sort of little tingling feeling to feel alive sometimes. And this is what you're seeing is that people are saying like, I've never talked to my neighbor. I hope she's okay. Or I've seen this person walk by every day and I wonder if I should ask him if his mom's okay or something. And this is why experiences in war zones, and war zone is a terrible term to use, are so enlightening and gratifying sometimes because you see the good in people. You see how humans react normally. You see how they care for each other. And if somebody needs help, they'll walk over and give you what you need. I think we're going to be a little disappointed when we go back to the normal and we sit on a subway and don't even talk to each other, or we just really have nothing to see in the news. But enjoy these times because there's no barrier to reaching out to people and just talking to them and sharing experiences or asking them how they're doing.
I keep hearing that, and I keep saying that myself, that we're going to miss this when it's over. Because, yeah, one thing I'm seeing is parents spending time with their kids. I see, I know, I know it sounds funny, but I do. And I see, fathers and sons out there throwing a football. I see them building model rockets, flying kites. I see people taking, puzzles over to grandma. Actually, in our neighborhood, you've seen those little huts where they, you leave a book, take a book, Well,
Yeah.
since so many elderly people like puzzles, somebody actually made a little shack and put a bunch of puzzles in it, and it became the neighborhood puzzle shack. And one neighborhood put together, I'll put a little bit of money towards actually just having a coffee truck, just give coffee to everybody who's walking by free. So there's a renaissance happening. And so I hear that a lot. We're going to be sorry when this is over because the quiet has been amazing. And also with that, we keep hearing... God,
let me just make a point here. This is also against the draconian background of government authority and being told to isolate yourself and don't trust humans because they might be carriers. And so I'm also picking up a little sort of 1984 vibe where we're seeing our government at its worst, where we kind of know how to deal with this, but we're watching this big lumbering thing try to keep up, right? And the idea, like, was it today they said, well, maybe we should have a card for people who have had the virus so that they're okay and other people are suspect. I mean, the government manifests itself in bizarre ways under a crisis. So the other thing we're going to take away from this is that we need to have more localized response mechanisms to these crises. Because, the New York City is not the same as Idaho, and New Orleans is not the same as Winnipeg, et cetera, et cetera. Each community is dealing with it the best they can. Now, they're supposed to have federal resources. They're supposed to get, ventilators, et cetera, et cetera. But we're seeing this big lethargic machine fail. And this is the other thing that we're going to take away from this is that maybe humans aren't that stupid. I mean, maybe we should spend a little bit more time, whether it's the volunteer fire department or getting to know the hospital and volunteering so we can save our own selves.
oh, definitely. And that's something that I'm seeing is where we have people in the community watching out for elderly people, watching out for people who are not well. making sure they have everything that they need. I've seen things just so touching in supermarkets. I just have to. I get a little teary, and that's not.
You're not supposed to touch in supermarkets,
I know you're not supposed to touch or have emotions, but I think I have to go hide and like break down because I see such beautiful things. One old guy's like, "Oh, I can't find any potatoes," and someone's like, "Oh, oh my God, here, take mine."
Yeah.
And you go, "Oh,
It wasn't that way during the toilet paper wars. I can tell you that.
well, that's toilet paper. We're just talking about potatoes here. Those are,
Well, we're evolving. I hope somebody does a documentary about this and shows how people's reactions goes from blind fear, almost like looting, to sort of wondering who's going to save them, and then realizing that nobody's coming to save you. You have to figure this out, and then slowly realizing that, well, maybe I need to lean on my neighbor and come up with a plan. And my $1,200 stimulus check isn't going to stimulate me very much if I haven't worked for 3 months. And there's a lot of things that people can learn from this event.
yes. It's like the old, what they call it, like penny auctions or something like that, where I think it's during the Dust Bowl when farms would be repossessed by the bank, and so they would sell them at an auction, and the community would come out, and the only person who would bid would be the person who owned it for a few pennies, and nobody else was allowed to bid. You
Well,
know,
you've got a rosy view of the Depression.
I know a lot of bad things happened too, but I do believe that's something that happened. At least there's one thing I do believe happened. But well, something you said, humans aren't so dumb. We're realizing that we're not so dumb, that we know how to take care of ourselves. There's a great book, and it just came out by Dan Carlin, the guy who has Hardcore History, and it's called "The End Is Always Near." And it made it right up there to the Amazon little mini bookstores, Amazon stores they have now. You can get it there. It's on Audible, but he talks about how we really are. It is extremely recent history to live in a time where all your kids live. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And so we in pandemics, he has a whole chapter on it. And so, it's almost like in our bone marrow, in our DNA, our ancestors lived through many, many, many pandemics. They're not new to us. And this is probably nowhere near what we've been through before. Just ask an ancient Roman. And so we know how to deal with it, and the end is always near. And so it's turning. I don't know. I think humans are suddenly smarter. I mean, when you give us something to fight, like you look at World War II. Okay, here's a mission. Man, we had football at the end of the war. We had football fields full of Sherman tanks and Corsairs and Hellcats that never even made it. We were cranking them out so quickly.
Also remember that humans have to get used to the idea of death. And this is the thing about fear. So the first time you hear that some horrific virus is coming and pus is going to be coming out of every orifice and you're going to catch it by, touching a doorknob or something, people react in sort of a blind, total state, right? They don't really think it through. As we learn more, as we understand how this thing works and what the real risks are, we're actually coming to terms with the fact of mortality, because we're saying, oh, well, this affects that person, not everybody. And during World War II and World War I and during the Spanish influenza and during the potato famine or whatever, humans actually get used to the idea of death. And this is where they focus on life. And that's what you were talking about when your first little segment there, about how you're really sort of appreciating your neighbors or whatever. We all die. We're not going to make it through. And how we die is really, sometimes up to us and sometimes not up to us. But it is a fortifier of the human spirit to deal with death and appreciate life at the same time.
Oh, it is. And it's making me think a lot about how it must have been here in America during World War II, for instance. People were scared, I'd imagine. And now we're doing that again. We have people that are scared. And it's funny, but it makes a tougher person. It makes a better community. And so, yeah, we hear a lot that it's never going to be the same after this. And I, for one, I think that's good. As long as we keep some of what's happening now, I hope it isn't the same, because, we suddenly find ourselves in a community again, and a much more personable community that, where stores open an hour early for the elderly to come in and make sure that they can get everything they need, and people are watching out for each other, and people talk in grocery lines. So,
Well, let's talk about that. So one of the biggest weaknesses of this event is the economy. The economy has cratered, and there's all kinds of experts that say, oh, we might be down 5%, 10%, 20%, 30%. Nobody knows. Nobody knows the incredible damage that's been done to the entire world, not just America, but for example, yesterday they're talking about laying off 45,000 people at Walt Disney World. Well, who cares? I'm not going to Walt Disney World, but then the entire Central Florida area is built around Disney World. The hotels, like shutting down Vegas, is catastrophic. And then having to keep it closed, not one, but two, but three, maybe 4 months, is a huge chunk out of people's salaries. It destroys their savings. It destroys their sort of sense of confidence and sort of getting ahead of things. So I think what's going to happen is that this just-in-time economy, where everything is centralized, everything is based on the cheapest, largest, most efficient model, is going to collapse. And I'm not a doomsayer. What I'm saying is we expect Amazon to drop something off, the next day. And then suddenly Amazon doesn't work because the people that work there aren't there anymore. We expect to go somewhere on a jet aircraft because we have a meeting on Friday, and that aircraft is not there anymore because that airline's not in business. So we have to rethink the sort of the functionality of how our economy is built. Will there be a gas station open if I drive 300 miles? Will there be a repairman there to fix my car if I need something done? So when we come out of this, we're going to have a greatly impoverished nation. We're going to have people that are looking around saying, I need food at my local grocery store, and if it comes from Chile or China or whatever, that doesn't help me. So we're going to see sort of maybe even a kind of a hippie-ish focus on sustainability, localized produce, going to the guy that fixes your shoes down the corner instead of shipping them somewhere across the country. So I think that's the upside. It's just going to be very painful for very many people.
It is. The people filing for unemployment are off the charts. It definitely damages the gig economy, as they call it. I know a lot of people, waiters and waitresses. I mean, there's a big mess. So yeah, I can see it in the community. And then as far as just in time, something that happened here that was interesting was how suddenly people who had chickens had something incredibly valuable, because now you can pretty much get eggs if you want now. But people were like, for a week or two, they're like, I can't get any eggs. Where can I get them? Who's got a chicken? And so something you never thought you hear somebody ask you in 2020. Hey, anybody's got a chicken? And so now people after this are making people have a good sized backyard, etc., and a little bit of know-how, are making chicken coops, because they're like, I don't want to buy eggs anymore because they can go away. I can just have 2 chickens, and I'll be giving eggs away. I'll have too many. So it definitely has changed the way we live already and the way we're going to live. And yeah, definitely the financial devastation. We're still figuring it out. It's, I want to be hopeful, and I am. Humanity will continue, but yes, this is. Let's see if there's a housing market crisis after this. I mean, you've got so many houses that are.
But wait, you're being an optimist. You cannot be an optimist.
Okay, I should not be an optimist. Well, okay.
Somebody sent you a memo saying, Craig, we're going to shut you down for 3 months. No income is coming in for 3 months. And then after that 3 months, we may not hire you again. And all the people you work with and all the friends in your neighborhood and all the businesses that rely on your money are going to crater as well. You need a plan. That's all I'm saying. You need a plan.
I agree. So, that's kind of dangerous places too, in a way. Like right now, we have our
mindset, the same mindset that people had before this virus came, which was, well, it's not that big a deal. It's China, they eat monkeys or whatever, that can't possibly come here. Oh, it's here. Well, it's not going to spread. Okay, it's spreading, but it won't come here because I live over here. And it's like, oh, hell, I live out in the country and there's people that have it. Okay, so that's the same thought process that humans have when the ship is sinking, right? Like the Titanic. Like, well, it's only just a little bit of water, I'm saying people are using that same thinking for the economy. And I'm saying, wake up, learn from the way you viewed the coronavirus spread. Now, it will end. There will be light at the end of the tunnel. But it's a very big deal. It's much bigger than the virus. It'll affect many more people than the actual illness, is the economic disaster that's about to happen.
It's good not to be an optimist. It's good to be a realist. Definitely, mindset is important because I think something that's going to be important in, I would say, dangerous place too. We have initially we've got our corona virus, as some people call it, the new corona world order. Some people call it the corona 1984 virus. The coronavirus, we have that going on. That will come and that will go. But yes, the financial devastation afterwards is a big deal, especially with the trillions that are being printed. It looks like 2 trillion is in the works. It'll probably be 6 trillion by the time this is over.
That's
And
in addition to the 3 trillion
mhm,
that President Trump spent. If you do the math, don't confuse debt with money.
yes,
If you're hungry and you need $10 and I lend you $10 versus give you $10, there's a huge difference. Like, don't confuse debt with money. He's creating debt. This is not money. This is debt. So yes, your stimulus check looks good, but where'd that money come from? It came from your taxes. It's just printing money is like a fool's gold, right?
it is. And the issue that people need to be aware of, and I understand many people are not aware of it, but that is devaluing the dollar. So all these jobs go away, and
Hmm.
I feel for people who have already immediately been uh, devastated by this, because there are people waiting in food lines. I mean, there's people who are really already suffering, and there'll be more who are suffering, and then eventually there'll be the people who flip, $1 million houses for a living. They'll be suffering. Like in our neighborhood around here, we've got a lot of flipping going on, and boom, I mean, they just got screwed
Yeah,
big time.
let me give you some advice. So when you travel to a war zone, the first thing you think is, I better take things with me that I might not find when I get there, right? And I better plan for the worst case scenario so that when bad things happen, I've got an idea, or I've got some reserves, or I've got some ability to handle these things, whether it's medical, financial, or legal, or whatever. What we're heading into is people losing jobs that they relied on because of the good economy, right? What we're learning is that people are resilient and the people around you understand the value of what you do. What I see is the government trying to recreate what we had before, sort of a stock market driven economy where the people had 401ks and they worked for big corporations, et cetera, et cetera. They should be thinking about revamping how people make money, about what is most valuable to a community. Is it more important to fix a road, or to expand a school, or to hire teachers, or is it better to put people back to work with debt, doing what they used to do? I mean, this thinking has not permeated itself into the White House, and the White House is driving this debt, this trillions of dollars of funny money that's going out there. It would be lovely to see somebody with some vision, somebody who's been in the third world, seeing destroyed states, seeing economies vanish overnight because of warfare, and watching how people rebuilt those economies and where they focused their efforts, be part of a decision-making team for these trillions of dollars. And that's my only point I'm making, is that I've been through this many, 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 many times. I've been to countries like Liberia and Chechnya and Sudan where it just went boom and there's nothing, like no money, no food, no jobs, nothing. And yet people build again, right? They're resilient, whether it happens in a day or a week or a month or a year. It's just putting the priorities where they should go, not thinking of giant sort of refugee camps and aid projects that fund the big money project. It's the little money that rebuilds the economy.
Definitely, and that's the thing with what we're currently doing the repo market, and then bailing out Boeing, basically the Fortune 500 and 1,000 and things like that. That's not necessarily the economy that affects the average American, you could say.
Well, it
Yeah,
is short term, because let's say you work for Boeing doing something, and let's say Boeing screwed up by making a plane that nobody wants, and they're financially in the toilet anyways, and airlines aren't going to be expanding because travel is going to be down for the next 5 years, blah, blah, blah. It's like Chrysler and the K car. Do we want to keep building building K cars and end up saying, okay, this business does not work. Should it be more like a consortium of aviation companies building planes, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, sure, you can sustain a job, go back to your job at Boeing, but what should you be doing? You have a degree in aviation or whatever, or you're a pilot. What should you do that generates short-term, immediate income to the country? Now think about the just-in-time economy. They destroyed the airline industry by coming up with this idea of hub and spoke, right? Like making people fly to like one city to get to another city and cramming planes full and flying as cheaply as possible, et cetera. So that model's broken now because nobody's going to be traveling. So what is the thing that you have to rebuild to make it work? Grocery stores. Some things show up on the shelves, some things don't show up on the shelves. When you buy flowers and they're from Kenya and the local grower doesn't have them, is that a good idea going forward, right? So a lot of the things that Donald Trump promoted, like making America great again, bringing back manufacturing, makes perfect sense if you change the model, if you localize it. If you think about what we need in a 100-mile or 1,000-mile radius to get back on our feet. These are the kind of things this is the kind of thing I'd like to see. And then the models already exist because they exist in war zones. We go in all the time to fix shattered places and to create jobs and to create sustainable, businesses, farming, whatever. So let's adopt some of that war zone thinking into the recovery process.
So that vision you're talking about, I definitely see that already happening on the community level.
Of
Now,
course, you have
now,
to.
yeah, yeah, whether it's happening on the national level or not, no, I would say they're not there yet. And I guess they're looking at the whole nation, so maybe they may never. But uh, one thing people said when they first heard about the coronavirus, and it began to be something that people were taking seriously, and it's just that people just seem to know this intuitively. They went, you know what? We're on our own.
You know that because the federal government has nothing to do with your survival. You know, it's they had the riots in L.A. back in the mid '90s.
Yes.
Everybody called the police and said, "Oh, look, there's people coming down the street and they're burning buildings." And then we had the era of roof Koreans. I'm trying to be funny here. Is that people realize, oh God, I have to protect my own store because the police aren't coming anywhere near this place. So this is the same thing on a federal level. Where, oh, I don't feel very well, I'm going to call the federal government. They're like, well, do you have health insurance? I mean, you're on your own. You basically have to figure things out, which is the way it was all the time anyways.
Yeah. So it's like America is now hearing. I guess they're realizing, welcome to the real world. This is how it really is.
So here's the other thing that really cropped up, and I kept laughing about it, was, Bernie Sanders talking about free healthcare, and everybody's like, oh, you commie, you. And then I'm thinking, wouldn't it be nice to have free healthcare to do coronavirus testing and have access to just low-level healthcare for these millions of people who are scared to death? And so suddenly socialized medicine, socialized things suddenly have a better appeal as the economy falls apart and we're prey to medical, minor medical afflictions. So the socialization, and of course, a lot of young people are already there because they got screwed by the boomers, is going to be a big topic. What should the government do for us? Because they didn't do a very good job with the whole coronavirus thing. Do we begin localizing? Do we begin socializing certain services because they're more efficient if the people own them and run them? So we might be heading into sort of a hippie socialist era.
Where people have their own chickens and grow their own cilantro, and we have big farmers markets. Well, I mean, I was in Somalia right after, I guess, right when the movie Black Hawk Down ended. That's when our group showed up. So I was there for 4 months, and that was really enlightening, seeing a society. I don't know if Somalia was a first world country in the first place. I'm not really sure, but it definitely was Stone Age by the time we got there, and it was
Stone Age. Now you have to be very careful here because
uh,
the colonial system in Africa overlaid a westernized structure on the capital cities, right? And those were not sustainable when the colonialism fell down because you need planes that fly in from the host nation to provide all those nice first world things. Somalia has some of the best coffee in the world because of the Italians, right? They love spaghetti. But the problem was is that these civilized things, the Western colonial things that were overlaid there, vanished in a heartbeat. So it looks like Stone Age to people because you're looking at an old, failed Western model.
Yeah, so it did look Stone Age to me, I guess I would say. And seeing how they went from a city, a society that was working to one that was not. I mean, that to me was very enlightening to see, well, what happens first, and you realize, well, you got to chase the bad guys out, and then you got to get food, you got to get water, you need electricity, you need, oh crap, the solar's not working. So me, since I was,
if you've gone 100 miles out of the city, everything works fine. It looks just as it did 1,000 years ago because that's a sustainable model.
oh yeah,
You know what I'm saying? It's like we build up structures like space stations that require so many sophisticated things to keep them going, right? And that when there's failure, when there aren't enough people to man the pumps or clean the streets or whatever, they fail. And then we blame people for like living in third world or developing nation. It's like, no, I didn't invent this westernized building that has no air conditioning. It's like you go to Africa and you go to a mud hut and you think, oh, this is primitive. And you go, well, it's nice and cool in here because it's made out of thick mud and it's got shade, it's got a grass roof. You go to the checkpoint that's got a tin roof and a concrete, and it's like, oh my God, it's 150 degrees in here. It's terrible because it's westernized, right?
yes.
So I'm just saying that this is what America's going through now is restructuring the way we view things from a highly centralized, highly efficient, highly sort of gig economy where everybody's shaving nickels and dimes, to one that's more localized and sustainable.
And yeah, that checkpoint that I was in, that was actually technically it was a black Connex box. It was hot as hell. So, so it seems like we're moving towards a sustainable America, and I think that many people have felt that as it is at this moment, as it has been, it's not really sustainable. It tends to be something most people can feel intuitively or they know factually. It doesn't matter, but moving towards a sustainable America, that would be like going back in time in some ways. We'd be like neo-Americans.
Okay, look at Uber, right?
Yeah.
Uber is a global company that has massive efficiencies by exploiting people that own their own cars and need work, right? You could build a localized Uber that's just for your city with people that hi Fred, hi Bill, or whatever, using the efficiencies of the internet, using the efficiencies of apps, right? It's everybody says, is it scalable? Is it scalable? Well, where does all that money go? It goes into the pockets of the founders and the stockholders, right? When they do their IPO. I'm just saying that there are extremely efficient models that can be localized. That's all.
No, I like it, and that's really something. So we're going to become our sort of neo-pioneer Aboriginal Americans again, and I like it. I'll take it because I think that
Okay, here, let me give you another example. I hate
yes.
to interrupt you.
No, keep going.
Look at the entertainment business. Look how it just fell right on its face because it's a centralized business in which people had to go into a studio with hundreds of workers, makeup, lighting, da, 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 da. And what are they doing now? They got their Mac laptops open with their whatever cheesy library they've strung together, and they're literally doing broadcasting. Like Saturday Night Live was made out of people at home using their laptops. No makeup, no nothing. And I'm just saying that you're seeing it happening already, where YouTube is a much more interesting channel than, let's say, NBC.
I would say there are many people, if not, I don't know if I'd say most, but many people, a high percent, that hardly watch their cable anymore. They only have cable because that's where the internet comes from. They watch their favorite YouTubes that come out every day. That's where they get their news. They watch, you name it. So yeah, right. I mean, well, here's one. Since you have been around the world and you've been doing video and creating media, how would you say it is for the person who wants to go and document right now? I mean, it has gotten, with the equipment that we have now, I mean, there's stuff that you have put out that's like heavy equipment that people could probably produce now on an iPhone.
Well, no, I'll give you an example. So PBS, which is a large station, which they say they don't have commercials, but it's full of commercials these days, used to have a centralized studio, and they used to have their experts and their staff, right? So every time they had an idea or topic of discussion, their staff would discuss it, and they had a produced package, right? They then had these poor people working out of their homes, and the sound would be cut off, and they couldn't get around to interview people, so they just sounded a little bit hollow. And then they said, you know what, let's just cut out the middleman. Let's send us your story. If you've been laid off, send us your story, right? And people just called in with their, Skype or whatever and said, well, I've been laid off. That was profoundly more entertaining and informational than what they were packaging before. So a friend of mine is going around documenting, what happens, the impact of coronavirus, right? And what you're finding is that you have the tools already. I mean, people are literally doing lip syncing contests. They're talking about how they need to fund their child's, surgery and blah, blah, blah. So I'm just saying that we're seeing the destruction of centralized entities and these efficient sort of, second generation sort of sweatshops. And we're seeing people waking up to the idea that I need bread, and I don't care if it's made by my neighbor or if it is made in China. I need bread, but it's not coming from China, so I better encourage my neighbor to make bread. So I hope people embrace this as a reason for change, right? It's a way to reboot. Sometimes it doesn't work out very well. Like after 9/11, pilots were asked, well, what's the best way to do security? And they said, well, you just turn to your neighbor and you say, hi, my name's Bill. What's your name, right? And if that person makes you nervous, let me know, right? Instead, we had security theater. We had long lineups of people fondling our genitals and x-raying us and looking through our luggage and telling us to turn our laptops on. And, none of this with the inherent human security that keeps people safe. So I'm saying let's not lose this opportunity. Let's have discussions and ideas, and let's look at what's happened in other countries where the economy has fallen, by 30% and people have been put out of work for months. And let's figure out how that worked, as opposed to letting the federal government saying, okay, we're going to lend you like thousands of dollars, or we're going to raise your taxes or lower the value of the money or whatever, and just continue with the status quo.
I like it. It's definitely time for the neo-pioneer American. And I think that's great. I mean, that's a much better world. I mean, gosh, I really hope when this is all over that, like in my community, we stay decent towards one another. That would be an amazing start.
Okay, so what in 9/11, again, the same thing happened. Everybody was terrified at first. Multiple planes coming out of the sky. Don't get on a plane. And then they began to realize that I take comfort from people I trust, right? And we launched off into a war that we won in a few weeks. And then we decided, let's just stay at war everywhere all the time. And that was the biggest mistake we ever made, because we now have been fighting global wars with no end, no meaning, no structure, no win, no goalpost. Let's learn from that, and let's not do it again, right? That's all I'm saying.
And so, like, when you say planning for worst case, after you have kind of event one, you have the corona, then you have event two, that's the economy. Then, of course, you could also look at, you've got the government being government. We can talk about that for sure. But when you're planning for the worst case, you're also being very creative. You're looking at, well, what can I do? Because there's a lot of people who are out of work, and now they're at home and they're doing their hobbies. Everybody I know is doing stuff that they used to like doing but haven't done for 20 years.
Well, let me give you an example. So we have a friend who has a big oven and loves to make bread, but she's not allowed to make bread because you need a license and you have to go all this, rigmarole, which is fine, health, all this, that. But you can't buy bread in the stores because it comes from a centralized bakery 300 miles away, right? And those employees aren't all there, so they have reduced output. So if X amount of people in a community buy X amount of bread, isn't there a business for someone there, right? If someone has a skill and they use the internet and they use marketing tools that are freely available, whether it be on Facebook or Twitter or however you want to do it, isn't there enough people in your local area to create a business? And you remember we used to go downtown to the mom and pop stores, right? They're all gone. They all got
Yeah.
killed by big box stores. Those big box stores are empty. They're hurting. They're desperately trying to hold on to their grip. Um, we need to inject this conversation into anytime somebody says, "Oh, the federal government's going to do this." We need to say, "Well, no, we'd like to do that." So the point I was making was, why not give somebody $10,000 if he's got a business model in a sustainable area, like the bread making idea, right? Give that person 10,000 bucks to make bread. Don't give 10 million to a corporation that's going to use it to buy back their stock because it's in the toilet and get rich. So I'm just saying these are the solutions that need to be pushed into the conversation.
Yes, I like it. So as everybody, plans for that worst case scenario, also they can plan for opportunity. The opportunities in that worst case, and just look at what's happening right now and react to it. Like I could say here in Scottsdale, if somebody, started a chicken farm, a small chicken farm, people would buy from them just so they would know that they could always get eggs. And I oftentimes think about daycare. I'm always like, why do we pay all this money for daycare when there's all these bored elderly people that would love to take care of kids all day? I
Because
mean,
of federal regulation, because you can't just go out and do certain things because there's mountains of red tape and things you have to do to get a license to do some of those things. That's what I'm saying. So in this time and era, like you say, if there's an elderly couple, it doesn't have to be elderly, it can be any couple that wants to look after your kids and them and they want to make a business out of them, then they should use their skills and they should get some seed capital and they should go for it. And then in 3 months, when they go back to their regular jobs or they don't want to do it again, they can make a decision. I'm going to keep doing this or I'm not going to do that. But we have to push back against the giant global sort of monopolists who want to have control over your communications, over your food, over your transportation, things like that.
yeah, and there's many layers to it, and we've got many different actors who are, trying to make their move at this time. And yeah, governments being. Go ahead.
Look at America at the turn of the last century. I don't know how many automobile makers you had, maybe 20, 30, 50, something like that. How many local stores there were that serviced the food, the clothing, all this kind of stuff. We are obsessed with efficiencies and globalization. And I'm just saying that there are plenty of models of economies that have cratered, how people pulled themselves up by the bootstraps, where funding went in to give people seed capital, to start small businesses, and how they pulled themselves up by the bootstraps and maybe created bigger businesses. So this is the solution, is to think small. And like I said, I go to a place in Liberia where as soon as you hear gunfire, the entire city runs into the jungle, right? And then they come back, and they come back with giant snails. They come back with greens they've dug out of the ground. They come back with a dead monkey and a dead whatever, and they sell it in the market. And there's one lady that I gave a 100-pound bag of flour to, started making donuts and selling them. In the economy within 2 or 3 days was functioning because people have to eat. There's certain needs that can be met. So all I'm saying is that I don't see any disaster planning or post-disaster planning in the government.
No, I don't either. I think they're more worried about the market and then, of course, the optics of it and looking like they're heroes more so than,
Well,
because, yeah.
the election needs certain metrics, right? There needs to be a healthy stock market. There needs to be a sense of consumer confidence. We want to be able to buy a washing machine, and I'm saying, well, what if there's a lady who'll do your laundry for you and pick it up? In other words, there's certain things that can be met, and I'm talking worst case scenario, right? Because who wants to be a washerwoman or a house cleaner or whatever when they used to be an office worker? But I'm just saying, think of the skills you have and how you can monetize those within the community you live in.
Completely. Yeah. I mean, it's very fortunate to have seen the places you've seen, and then I've traveled a bit and I've seen some. And one thing I do realize is that humanity will continue. So, like the American Neo Pioneer now, they will continue and be better off. Because, I mean, I know I think about the craziest stuff since I've seen some of the world and some disasters around the world, and I think, well, there's all these oranges and lemons here. I could just start picking them. There's trees all over Scottsdale, and just and just start selling them at the end of the street. I mean, we really are unstoppable, and I kind of I'm excited. I don't want anybody to suffer, but I am excited to see what Americans come up with.
Yeah, well, accept that it's not going to be the same. I mean, just absorb that idea, and it's hard to do, but it's like death. You know, you're going to die. So what are you going to do in between now and then? The economy took a major hit, so it's going to impact all of us. I'm in the misery business. I'm doing fine. But the point is that most people were shocked to find out the economic damage that's been caused by the locking people up, saying you can't go into your work, you can't do this, shutting down entertainment. This is a huge hit into our economy. But then I'm saying, start micro, start thinking about what you always wanted to be when you grew up. I mean, think lemonade stand style businesses, right? Think about something that you could do that would sustain yourself without relying on, having to work for an employer. And I'm telling you, this is how America got started. This is how people came over here and began to build businesses, by seeing a local need and meeting it.
I like that. So yeah, so the neo pioneer is restarting America. I like it, and it makes sense because I'm already seeing that creativity happen. Because like I say, there's so many people who are at home, and they didn't like their job in the first place. They weren't that excited about it. Now they're at home, and they've got just time, and it's quiet, and they start to eventually, once they've done some Netflix marathons and had a few pizzas and drank a lot, they start going, maybe I should. I'm bored of being a slob.
Think about Kickstarter and Etsy,
Yes.
eBay. Think about these tools that you can use to create something and then localize it. And okay, fine, maybe you can nationalize an idea, but let's say you have a knack for something and you want to sell it. We can say, look, the American Renaissance requires that you support Americans in their time of need. No more big box, no more offshore. Everything has to be sustainable within a certain area, right? And you'd be surprised at how many people would embrace that idea. So instead of buying a $15 pair of jeans, buy a $40 pair of jeans that some lady made in her house, right? I mean, just simple things like this.
Yeah. Even local construction. I mean, there's so much opportunity. So yeah, as we plan for the worst case, we can also plan for the best case. And I do think that at the end of this, as we begin to whatever bottom is, as we move up, maybe we've already hit bottom and we're going to move up, or maybe we're not there yet. But
We
as
haven't hit bottom.
okay, so we haven't we haven't hit bottom yet. I was being optimistic. I got to work on that. Usually, you see, that's a
Be
good thing.
pragmatic. Be pragmatic, not optimistic.
Yeah, see, that's the good thing about talking to you, because most people think I'm cynical, where you're like, dude, stop with the optimism. So it helps
Yeah.
me. It's good. And so as we recover, I think we're going to see a renaissance. And I also do think we will see a renaissance of entrepreneurial efforts. Sole proprietorships. We're going to see a renaissance of small businesses, just one individual or a few. So I think
Oh,
we're going
yes.
to, yes.
Americans are inherently industrious and creative. The gig worker was basically indentured servitude, right? I'm just saying, break out of that. Start looking at what skills you have or what services you can render, and start localizing it and start making money being an independent businessman. And let's push that into the narrative, so when we're told by a centralized government that really doesn't have any skin in the game, that, oh, we're going to spend money here, we push back with our representatives, say, no, you know what? I think you should spend the money locally. I think you should think about reviving local businesses, which is his whole campaign slogan, Make America Great, which is kind of funny. But let's push for people getting back on their feet by doing something they're good at in their community.
I like it. Yeah, because right now the Make America Great is a little bit like Make the American Market Great again. So I do get it. Like, really, we're the ones who have to make America great. Trump will take care of making the market great if that's possible. But that doesn't have to be our concern. And that's one thing. We tend to have this notion of it's got to be big. It's got to be a big company. Like you're saying, it's got to be scalable. Who cares? What's wrong with finding a way or two just to make a living and have a good life?
Exactly. You don't need to scale. Scale is when you sell something. It's like housing, right? If you buy the house that you like and you live in it, why do we think we have to sell it and make a profit and buy a bigger one, right? Those days are over. The new generation, Generation Z or whatever they're called, is so screwed. Is so screwed if they think like that.
And we're kind of going. We may go back to a time where I know when I grew up on the East Coast, um, houses were a way that a larger family, would create wealth in the family. So, one person has a house, then there's some new people, they get that house and they buy a new house. So basically, people would just buy more, a family would buy more houses as it got bigger, and they would keep them. The notion of selling it was absurd.
Well, let me amplify that. Actually, housing, Levittown, post World War II, was to get people out of tenements where there were all these diseases and rats. So living in the suburbs and having your own home and being able to care for it was the backbone of the 50s growth cycle, right? It was only in the 80s when everybody decided that this was an engine to make money by exploiting it that it crashed, right? So we're going to see a housing crash. We're going to see a lot of people hurt because they thought that it's like a bank account. You just refinance and grow, and we're going to see housing just being a staple. Something you live in and enjoy, and you might make a little money because of inflation or whatever when you sell it.
It's true, and that's ultimately a better life. And there is something about the flipper mentality. As flippers go through a community, they make their money, but it really does steal the community's soul. It loses it.
Talk
Yeah.
about Airbnb destroying, property values. I mean, this efficiency, this ripping through traditional businesses and making them more efficient, is not benefiting people. It's benefiting corporations, and a lot of people actually make money off Airbnb, and just suddenly, poof, that income vanished overnight.
Oh, yeah, I know. And then suddenly that house that cost, 3,000 a month, they used like Airbnb for 6,000 a month. Now, well, they're screwed, you know?
And that rental you had, now you have to pay the mortgage on that because that guy can't pay the rent. I mean, this is all cascading. I'm not a doom monger. I'm just saying, look at the worst case scenario, plan for that, and then you'll do fine. Don't be like coronavirus as it first came to America. Like, we've only got one case and he's from China and we're good, right? We're at we have 100 cases now in the economy part of it.
Yeah. And one thing about the coronavirus, at this point, like whatever a person might think of it, I mean, because there's so many numbers that come out, there's so much different information. I mean, it's really hard to even follow all the news about it. You can almost take that and put it to the side a little bit and kind of go, that's going to come and that's going to go. But what's coming next, the financial aspect, which has already started, that's
Hmm.
almost where a person needs to focus. And so I would ask, here's a question for you. And I know we cannot give anybody medical advice here on the show. Of course, we know that. But I would say, there's great articles that I'm seeing coming out, and some of them do have good valid points. Like one was on Zero Hedge today, 8 reasons to end the lockdowns now, and it gets into, well, more people will die from the lockdown than the virus. It goes into a lot of very well documented reasons why maybe we should just give it up, get back to work. So do you think America should stay shut down, or should we just get out there and work on that herd immunity and realize that unless you have a pre-existing condition, get out there and work that immunity?
Okay, well, first of all, I'm going to give you free medical advice. You do whatever you feel you need to do to stay safe and healthy and keep those around you safe and healthy, okay? So, for example, face masks. If wearing a face mask makes people around you feel comfortable, then do that. If being isolated or standing 6 feet away, which is a way to prevent transmission, makes other people comfortable and keeps you healthy, then do that. But the problem is that these decisions are being made by governments for us. So asking me what we should do is irrelevant because I'm not the government. So I didn't tell you to go into your house and stay there for 2 weeks.
Definitely, I understand. Well, governments are being governments, and we can see a lot of stuff going on. Like you have Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, Dianne Feinstein's nephew, I think. declares California a nation state, which he said very loosely. It's a bit dramatized. But then at the same time, you've got Governor Greg Abbott in Texas saying maybe even next week we're going to open back up. And now we're seeing pressure on our Governor Ducey here in Arizona. Hey, Texas is opening up. Come on, you got any Liberty Bells? Let's open up Arizona. And it does.
And what's that going to do? Like, as soon as a governor decides that he's going to open up, are people going to flock to restaurants if there's still COVID-19 carriers out there? No. Are people going to sit in movie theaters and watch Star Wars?
No.
No. People ultimately rule what happens, right? The government can tell you to do certain things, but am I going to go lick doorknobs at an NFL game, just because I'm told it's fine to go out? No, I'm going to make decisions myself. I'm going to take care of my own health and those around me, right?
No, I think that's best for sure. Yeah, that is true. I had not thought of that. It is true. So even if next week Texas opens back up, well, and so does Arizona, and then states start doing it because there's pressure. Yeah, we've only just begun. It's not over at that point. It's very, very true. Like I would not go to a movie anytime soon, and that's the thing. I'm probably. I wouldn't even say skeptic isn't the right word. I'm okay with the risk of going out, but I realize, like you're saying, a lot of other people are not. And then maybe you're okay, but like your family doesn't want to go. Then your family doesn't want you to go. And so, oh my gosh, it's going to be a long time before we see restaurants filling up again, if ever. I mean, I think.
Well, okay, I'm fearless. I'm not stupid, right? So, if I feel that there is a risk of catching a debilitating disease and I can't function for a week or 2 weeks because I'm sick, I'm going to take precautions, right? Just like if it was a flu, just like if it was Ebola, just like when I walk around fields of dead, bloated bodies. I'm obviously going to take precautions so I don't get ill. And I'm also going to take precautions so that those around me aren't infected by what I do, right? So I think we're just going to be very cautious going forward. And a governor who's under pressure from whatever to open up everything, okay, fine, go for it. But it doesn't mean all the people will stream out and start socializing again.
It's very true, yeah, now that I think of it. Because, yeah, so it kind of makes it easier for governors to open up a state, lift the lockdown. Because, yeah, it isn't like much is going to change the next day.
Okay, so I will make a prediction. There will be a bunch of bubbas who will have a post-corona party, of which a large number of them will come down with coronavirus. So we can make that prediction right now, right? So I'm just saying that use your own best judgment to keep healthy and stay healthy and keep those around you healthy, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, well, I think definitely here we're on the side of we don't know. So when we go out, we kind of look like ninjas with our masks and our gloves because we're like, hey, I don't know. I honestly cannot tell you. I don't know the severity. I don't know how, virile this virus is. I don't, honestly, I look at it like, here's one that I have found when it comes to understanding what's going on that I have learned now more than ever. And even though maybe I should have known this, sometimes you know something, but then you really know it. You really get it. And something that I've picked up on is, don't trust anybody selling anything.
Well, we will slowly get back to normal, but the normal will be very different than the pre-COVID-19 normal. And all I'm saying is plan for the worst and be pleasantly surprised by what really happens. So, I mean, we will all gang together when the time is right, when we feel like this is a minor event, we will try to patronize our favorite restaurant more, and we'll try to, buy groceries. But we should have learned something from it, that we're too dependent on just-in-time economy, certain efficiencies that bring things from thousands of miles away. And we should just focus on rebuilding locally more.
Yeah, the whole, rather than think globally, act locally, think locally, and act locally, damn it.
Invigorate your local community, because at the end of the day, those are the people that are going to keep you alive. But we should have learned this, right? That loaf of bread that's made 1 mile down the road is much more attractive than the loaf of bread that's made 1,000 miles away or 500 miles away, right?
Oh, and also if you want to be, if shit does hit the fan, you want to be an asset to your community. Be the person who's got chickens. Everyone's gonna be looking out for you because they're gonna want those eggs.
Right. Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
yeah, definitely. And so, well, I've had you for about an hour. It's great. I mean, there's so many more things I could ask you about, but I really just wanted to get across to people, hey, here's Robert Young Pelton, a person who's been to many dangerous places, and here's his take on a few things when it comes to America now being a dangerous place. Your life is a dangerous place, and you're not used to it. And I hope this kind of helps people, I don't know, get a mindset in how to deal with it because we really don't know what's next. We can predict, but we'll see. It will definitely be extreme, whatever it is, most likely. And one last question. you know, something I've already seen around town is people do less dumb things.
That's never going to change. Come on.
It's never. It's
Again, being an optimist.
I'm being an optimist, but I think about becoming a neo pioneer American again. Like I think we used to have to be more careful, or none of us would have made it. You look at all the dumb things people do because there are ambulances, because there's band-aids. Well, back in the day there weren't, and I'm seeing people being a little bit more careful. So I would just say, hey everybody, it's been great having Robert Young Pelton on. It's just an honor. I love it. It's a great time. Everybody be careful. Don't do stupid things. Plan for the worst. Hope for the best. Or maybe just... How would you sign off, Robert Young Pelton? How should people handle the next few weeks?
Just have faith in humanity and less in your government. That's all I can tell you.
And I think that's wonderful because you know what? I think if anyone's been out and about and they've had their eyes open, I think that is proven to be correct.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, stay safe, stay healthy, and talk to your neighbors some more, and you'll probably find that they're very interesting people.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care, Robert Young Pelton. We'll talk to you again sometime. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, Greg.
Bye.
Bye.